Hey everyone, welcome to Wednesday night. Welcome to Humpday Happy Hour with Dennis in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It is live and it is over a cocktail, and it also happens to be a very special night. Do you know why it's a special night? I'm going to tell you. It's because tonight you get Dr. Chad Duplantis, Dr. Jennifer Bell, and Dr. Jeff Horowitz talking controversies in dentistry. This is something that we've been toying with. We're really excited about, and it's something that we've wanted to bring to the forefront because we always get into these small talks that we say, we're going to talk more about that. We're going to come back to this. We're going to revisit that. And we think we might make this into a regular thing. So let's see how that goes. As you can see, I'm joined by some of my best friends in the industry. I'm with Dr. Chad Duplantis below me. I'm with Dr. Jennifer Bell next to me. And together we are dentists in the know. We are all educators. We're all dentists. And we're all business owners. Our job is to bring all of you in the know. So welcome, my friends, to our first controversies in dentistry. I feel like there should be like a loud music, like a boom, 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 or something like that when we say
like a horror movie.
Yeah. Controversies in dentistry. Boom, boom, boom. I like that.
Maybe we should rephrase the show like "Welcome to the Humpday Zone." You know, kind of like a Twilight Zone type of theme.
This was not an ordinary night for Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell.
It was not.
Or they were working in
the It's not been an ordinary anything.
No, we were talking before the show. It didn't seem like it was very ordinary a day or week for any of us, huh?
I know that we think it has to do with the full moon, but it's not even the full moon. Like, I don't know if it's the combination of kids getting out of school, summer's in the air, barometric pressures are goofing around with humidity. I don't know what it is, but I know people be going crazy.
And literally every patient I have is going out of the country and they need it done yesterday. There will be no one left in the United States, at least in Conway, Myrtle's Inlet, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Yeah, that's true.
They are all fleeing the country as of tomorrow, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. Also weird pain stuff. You know, you go through these phases where things seem to be trucking along fine, and then you get like 6 different complex pain diagnosis cases that you're trying to figure out.
Send those to me.
Okay. No, so I gotta tell y'all this
some
story.
Percentage just a bad tooth. Like, just trying to figure out which one. Like,
just point to it, buddy.
Hey, y'all.
Tap.
It's so interesting that you say that. I got to tell y'all this story from yesterday. So our new patient intake is 7 bite wings, intraoral scan, clinical evaluation, hygiene eval, doctor eval, and, you know, we kind of go through everything. And I start walking through the scan with them. You know, I go through everything. So we had this new patient come in a couple weeks ago. We diagnosed an occlusal on 15. And we diagnosed an MOB on tooth number 3. It was like 2 really benign things. Okay. So she comes in because we had to do a 4386 or 4346, you know, like a gross debridement in the presence of inflammation. And we were going to follow up on a prophy too, like not deep enough pockets to do a full scale, but, you know, really not going to get through a full prophy. We just needed to get some of the calculus off there. She did beautifully. She comes back for the fine tune, and she comes in on like Monday of last week and says, you know, hey, those fillings are bothering me. And you know, I hate to say it, that kind of drives me nuts when a patient says, you know, those fillings I need to get done are bothering me, because, you know, if a filling hurts, we know healthy teeth don't hurt, right? So fast forward, you know, of course, we had an opening in the schedule. Let's move and put her in there. So we put her in there. So I kind of walk back with my song and dance, and I'm like, look, hey, and looking back, you have, you know, a couple of fillings that need to be done. They aren't terrible. And I said, we really need to get to the root of the problem, because in all honesty, the teeth that you have the fillings on, they shouldn't be hurting. You know, and looking back at all of my records and looking back at your scan and your initial exam, I said, fillings really shouldn't hurt. If they hurt, then we're thinking more in lines of a crown or a root canal, possibly a cracked tooth. There's a number of things that are being going on, but I don't want you to think that you coming in and getting this occlusal filling and this little filling on the other side is going to take care of the discomfort that you're having. So let's get to the root cause of it. And she goes, okay. And I was like, how is it hurting? And she's like, and I don't know if you all do this, but when I have like myofascial pain, I'm like, show me exactly where it hurts. And the patient usually goes, right there. And so that's exactly what she does. And I'm thinking, all right, she's clenching, she's grinding. I'm like, I got this. We're good. So we start talking about some symptoms and some parafunctional habits and everything that's going on. And we're still going to do the fillings, but I have time. We're just going to kind of walk through it. I haven't even looked in her mouth yet because I know I'm doing these 2 fillings. I'm just like, all right, I'm going to take a look before we do everything. I look in there and she has cracked the ever-living shit out of tooth number 15 that just had an occlusal cavity on it. And I mean, it was this little bitty occlusal cavity on tooth number 15, like 3 to 4 weeks prior. And now she's fractured this tooth entirely through and through. So now I'm like, okay, I got to eat my words. This cavity could be hurting. You kind of did do something to this tooth over the past few weeks. We do need to address this today. Let's take a 5x5 CBCT. So we go and we take a 5x5 CBCT, and clear as day, that fracture is through and through all the way to the apical of the mesiobuccal root on tooth number 15. And you could see it.
Smokes.
Like you see these
and
fractures.
That's just bothering her a little bit.
And you look, and I looked at the scan versus the intraoral image that we took that day. And I'm like, holy crap, how did this happen? And it's like, okay, I'm eating my words. This is what's going to happen. We're doing an extraction and an implant because this
from
is
a simple occlusal.
Yeah. And she was, the thing is, she was a great patient years ago, hadn't been in several years. She totally got it. And I mean, she's like, I know what did this. I know what did it. But it just goes to show, there's so many things that we say, we get into our routines, and, radiographs can show us so much. Intraoral scans can show us so much. These right here can sometimes show us the most.
Yeah.
And we've got to not dismiss.
My last dentist said he would squirt some Fuji and something.
Well,
Yeah.
she did ask me. She said, can't you just
you just
squirt
glue
some
it
of that
together?
Bondo stuff in there and put it all back together? I'm like, yeah, no, it's gone. She gone. She gone. Yeah. So sorry. It just was relevant to what you said, JB.
Yeah.
No,
I've also seen multiple fractured teeth over the last 4 or 5 days. It just seemed to come in very weird waves,
Everything in dentistry comes in waves.
I know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that honestly for me, and as much, we always have some fun talking about some of the crazy clinical things we see and some of the demands we have from patients. For me, the struggle has really and truly been internal. It has been so internal. The just the team members, everything from the medical insurance billing side kind of turning upside down, and there are greater ramifications to some of the issues with Medicare and medical billing insurance, and some of the entities that can then come in, audit you, and the fines that are applicable with that. And patients are made very well aware of that. So when everything doesn't go exactly the way a patient wants with medical insurance, very often their first response is, well, I'm going to call the government. I'm going to call Medicare and see what they have to say. And so really a lot of what we've been struggling with has just been, the fact that we lost a billing person. That billing person was, perhaps not as efficient as they could have been in their position. And, some things were missed, and we're having to deal with the ramifications from the patient side, because of course they're unhappy when insurance says, well, this wasn't filed correctly or this was not coded correctly, and things like that. So the struggle is real, and as much as we come on and we try to act like the dentists in the know, and as much experience as we all have in our given areas, I think we all feel the same struggles, and right now it's just a lot of internal struggle.
Yeah,
I think we're all going through it.
Well, and it's in every industry. We do share a lot of similarities with any other profession that works directly with the public, that operates within a tiered system where you have technicians, you have certain skill sets of each individual. I had a guy who runs one of the local auto companies, major repair system. And, they're struggling to find technicians and mechanics that can come in and do repair work. And, a lot of the same struggles that they're having are very similar to the things that medical professionals are dealing with, trying to get support personnel into the hospitals and the medical clinics, the same that we're dealing with in dentistry and restaurants, and any service industry is really struggling, trying to capture the same subset of individuals who want to come in and work every day. So I'm afraid it's going to get worse, quite frankly, before it gets a lot better. And that's not to be pessimistic, but the reality is just trying to, we're all vying for the same people,
I hear you.
Especially the smaller your community is, the smaller we kind of drill that down, the harder it will be to have good quality people, I think, in your practices. So anyway.
I heard something interesting this week when we talk about all that. We're talking about employees, talking about, different various work capacities of employees. I have an employee that moonlights or works the weekends at Home Depot, and there's a new grocery store that came into town. Are y'all familiar with HEB?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. With what now?
HEB?
Not at all.
Okay, so HEB started in the San Antonio area. The guy that owned the grocery store chain was Henry E. Butts, and it's a fantastic grocery store. And when they came to North Texas, they just opened up an arc.
He said Butt.
I did say Butts, Henry E. Butts. But anyhow, fantastic grocery store. And they came to the North Texas area a few weeks ago. So they were looking for employees. And when they opened up, this store is so well known by Texans. We've never really had them in the DFW area. And I had them in Austin in college and in San Antonio for dental school. So I knew it very well. We were excited about it. I still haven't been yet. But when they opened up, the parking lot was just stupid nuts. There was a line to get in because they gave a bunch of free crap away. But they also sent an employee out to some local businesses. Tanya, I get it. HEB is heaven. I'll send it to El Paso. Okay. I get it. I love you too, Tanya. Thank you. It is heaven. I haven't been there yet because I don't want to deal with lines. I don't do lines and I don't do waiting at restaurants. However, fast forward, they send an employee out. Employee goes into local businesses and starts like
recruiting your people.
Yeah. So at Home Depot, who pays very well and does, really good at taking care of their employees, telling some of the Home Depot employees that they get insurance, 401k, all of this stuff from day one, and their pay is going to be X, which was really good. And, of course,
Chad filled out an application because this whole thing is like,
I did.
The last couple of weeks I've had, I'll fill out a damn application.
I want to let you all know, I am not only a dentist in the know, but I am a cashier in the know.
I would definitely work in the bakery.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of crazy what's going on in the real world, and people are leaving Home Depot to go work at HEB, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, I found it very interesting.
Isn't that a microcosm of what we're seeing in dentistry? Really,
I mean, it's a macrocosm, Jeff.
You're right. You're exactly right. It is a macrocosm. The thing is this is what we're dealing with from having to worry about larger corporate organizations that are coming in that can afford to pay more, can give more benefits, can give more vacation time, and maybe they won't be able to offer the same level of job satisfaction or
Culture and
culture, right? But at the end of the day, people have to feed their families and make sure they're covered medically and have time off, and it's a.
Well, Jeff, you could even argue, like, I think you're referencing like DSOs and corporate dentistry
Of
and
course.
that, but I never thought we would also be competing, to Chad's point, with Target and HEB and Home Depot paying.
No.
Do you know what I mean? So like,
Agreed.
we thought, especially when you came online in dentistry, which was like, what was that?
Back in the
09?
MySpace days.
1909.
Yeah.
In the MySpace era.
Moses had a great set.
But back then, at least, and even up until I would say maybe even 8 years ago, I just was more focused on losing an employee to the local other dental office. Like a DA2 could then take their skill set and go work for someone else being a DA2. But now they can leave me to go be a DA2 or to go work at an Amazon distribution center, making more than what I can pay them in their skilled job set in my practice. So, the private practitioner is struggling to be able to provide a competitive environment for employees. Again, to your point, inflation does not seem to be slowing down. And so if they are forced to make decisions between feeding their family, providing medical insurance coverage for their folks in their family as well, it's a very tough market for small businesses to stay competitive. And that's not unique for dentistry, but any industry that has these tiered skill sets, that skill set only was important when it earned you the ability to earn above a cashier, above a deli slicer. That was not necessarily like a technical skill. So you're willing to invest in the education because you thought it would give you an extra $5 an hour, $10 an hour, whatever. That's not true anymore. And so what's the incentive to become a DA2 or an ultrasound technician or a radiology technician or a sterilization technician if I can just go stock shelves at Target and starting salary is $20 an hour with full benefit? It's a totally different ballpark that we're operating in.
And I'm going to venture to say that some of it has to do with insurance, because when they leave Target, they don't wait for their insurance to pay before they pay for their bread or their toilet paper or their paper towels. But also, you look at some of these, we were talking DSOs just a minute ago, and I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. You talk about some of these larger DSOs, they've got the balls, the pelotas, the cojones, whatever you want to say, to come after your team via marketing mail in your practice where their license is registered.
Mm-hmm.
And that scares me, because there's no limits. There's no limits and there's no ethics when you're poaching employees.
So guys, we've already sort of dabbled into the controversy.
I think we got a big controversy that wasn't even a topic. Hey, by the way, why don't we go to news?
Let's do that, because we're already at like
we're going to stick with controversies tonight.
You don't want to do news?
Mm-mm. Guys, it's a slow news week.
Okay,
fine.
There's just not a lot of good stuff out there now. I mean, there's a lot of negative dental stuff. Like some guy got charged with fraud. Another guy lost $1 million lawsuit. And it's like none of it's very happy. I will say one maybe important thing that we should know, although I don't think many dentists reference this organization very frequently, but the dental organization OSAP, which maybe you became more familiar with during the pandemic because they were actively involved in a lot of the regulatory things that were coming out. and providing some direction on infection control, aerosolization, and all that good stuff. They did change their name. I'm actually trying to find what they changed it to, but they did change their name. And so they are kind of redefining who they are. I always get just a little bit anxious when organizations do that, not knowing 100% what their mission creep might look like, because they were a pretty big player in creating a lot of the recommendations for what we were seeing for dentists during COVID. And so I think that continues to be the role that they, want to play in the industry. So I'll find their name somewhere and we'll put that forward. But
so if you want to skip the news, and I'm great with that, and go straight to the controversies, what I thought would be cool, why don't we each, because we had a little discussion about this before the show, and all three of us kind of came up with topics that we wanted to discuss, and then we'll tell everybody which three we ended up landing on, and then we'll dive right into it. So, JB, what were the topics that you wanted to talk about and why?
You got it. Also, OSAP, which was the Organization for Safety, Asepsis, and Prevention, has changed their name to the Association for Dental Safety. So, right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we will continue. We believe that ADS captures the spirit of who we are and signals our dedication to patient and provider safety, science-based learning, integrity, competent community, and collaborative leadership. So we'll continue to watch them. All right. So my topics were coming hot off the heels of our more recent reel that kind of took a life of its own. I really think it highlighted the very controversial topic of licensure and how one obtains a dental license here in the US. And it is pretty broad sweeping because you can go all the way to the admission process for dental school, through the educational process and requirements to become competent in dentistry, national boards part 1 and part 2, and then what is the final, or is there a final requirement in order to obtain licensure where you would like to practice? And each facet of that conversation in and of itself is extremely controversial.
Yeah, no doubt. What else?
The other thing that we were going to potentially discuss this evening are a lot of the insurance issues that have been coming to light. I know Chad brought forward one recently. I brought forward one recently as well. Some of the language that we're starting to see from the insurance companies about whether they're approving procedures or not, and some of the interesting tactics that they're using to deny coverage for procedures has been very interesting as well. Another one that we discussed potentially was fluoridation. I actually just saw a news article recently. Actually, it's an old story of a person in Vermont who was the water commissioner of that city that was silently adjusting the fluoridation levels to lower than the standard because they didn't believe in the safety data on fluoride. So they were just over there sort of, I kind of envisioned like this big knob, and they're just like turning the knob to adjust the fluoridation for the city, which is kind of scary that it would be up to one singular person to control that. So fluoride has been pretty controversial recently, where you're seeing more and more municipalities going back to the drawing board to discuss whether or not they want it in their water source, and the ADA is sort of doubling down on their stance on fluoride. So that's another hot topic.
I love it. So I had a couple of things, and believe it or not, I went a little bit old school on this, as you would imagine I would. But I love what you're talking about, especially because of how timely some of this is. And that's why we kind of lean towards taking on some of these more timely issues right now. But to me, the thing that I always end up coming back to is extract or save the tooth. How old is that question? in dentistry? When is it time to do herodontics? When is it time to say, you know, cold steel and sunshine, and let's put an implant in? And that's still a question, because I remember a time in practice when I was telling patients with teeth that I would now try to save first, saying the literature says the long-term prognosis for this tooth is not good. Let's get it out and put the implant in. Well, guess what? The literature for implants then caught up, and the success rates caught up, and maybe we should have considered saving some of those teeth. So that led me to the next controversy, which is, are we all literature based? Are we basing everything we do on current evidence or on clinical experience and clinical relevance based on our experience levels? Because I'm going to tell you that that was a real turning point for me when I was telling a lot of people to have teeth out that I would now save, having seen the level of complications with implants and the fact that that is not a no-brainer decision. So I think that's a good discussion. And then the last one that I had was this discussion of informed consent, because doing a lot of legal defense work, that's always one of the first things that comes up in the discovery phase of these trials is, was there an informed consent sign? Did they go into everything that could happen from the injection? And how detailed does your informed consent need to be? When do you need to have them signed? And should you have a different informed consent for every single procedure you do? Do you have a general informed consent? Or, you know, I think that that's a great topic.
I love that topic.
Yeah,
and not that I don't love
too.
the others, but
Yeah.
that's a good one.
So, Chad, what were your controversies?
The declination and the declination informed consent, right? Basically stating, I'm choosing not to do what you can add that into the list of, do you have that as part of your forms as well? And I think that's fairly controversial. Like, they don't want to take x-rays. Do you have them sign it? And does it really hold up? Because
and one more, this concept of, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. Bullshit.
Right.
How many things do we do that actually happen that don't get written down?
I was
do you
also
write down
breathing.
PlayStation bib on the patient?
Right.
No. But both of you know, excuse me, both
Gosh
of you know
darn
pretty damn well that the bib was placed on the patient. So if you have and this is so important, having an assistant or a hygienist or someone else in the room that knows what you do and can attest to the things that you do, because no, not everything you did is written down. And just because you write it down does not mean that it did not happen.
Right.
So yeah, I get fired up about
I also was breathing in and out, but I didn't make a note.
Yes. Yeah. You know, aspirated 3 times.
Yeah. My butthole tightened up like this when I seated it, just in case. Like it didn't work out.
So anyway, that'll be a lively discussion. But Chad, what were your thoughts on controversies we should talk about?
You said bullshit, and Jennifer said butthole.
Yeah.
Thank you, Captain Censorship.
I also threw out a GD, which I should not have.
Yeah, gosh darn. He said gosh darn.
Yeah, so my 3 topics are, I believe, how many views have we had on the Instagram Reels? Over 400,000?
Yeah, 450,000.
I was going to say 485.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Licensure was obviously one of my topics, because I think that's pretty good. It was obviously pretty well received and very well debated. Jennifer, could you put your forehead in clear view of the camera, please? Because I'm curious. If you look at her forehead, you know she's lying.
Yo, that was definitely a comment.
Yeah.
Sure.
my next one was
Actually, people now look to Jennifer's forehead as a forecasting
Yes.
tool.
yeah,
And a bullshit meter.
Bullshit meter.
bullshit. Yeah. New insurance requirements. Jennifer had mentioned that. We talked about kind of one of the things I talked about is root canals. Like, when do you decide to punt or retreat? And then, my last one was just not necessarily a controversial topic, but just something that I think is relevant is that what are our biggest pain points in clinical dentistry? And why have you decided to continue or discontinue doing things in your practice and take it one step further? How do you, and this happens several times on a daily basis, how do you share that with a patient that you no longer perform that procedure in your practice because this,
Because I effed up the last 4 I did.
Yeah.
You don't want me to do it.
Yeah. So, and this was a topic that was brought up this week too, that I didn't think of. I meant to mention it. I should have mentioned it, but there were like 3 people on social media that were talking about, and one was in our local neighborhood group about when a provider should share that they broke a file in a patient's tooth. And the one in our neighborhood group was, when do you think the dentist should tell you that they broke a thing in your tooth?
A thing?
Yeah, they broke something in my tooth and now I got to get it pulled and I want to know when they should tell me.
Interesting.
Yeah, there you go.
So of these, we ended up going with licensure, the insurance topic, and informed consent. That's what seemed to have the most traction. So let's get right into licensure.
But based on the pace at which we're going, we're going to get through one.
Well, that's fine.
That's okay. We'll save the next one.
We've already committed to having more of these.
Agreed.
Yeah. This is what happens when you run out of guests, folks.
All right. So I would like to start the controversy with a recap of why we've now honed in on this. So a few weeks ago, we did a story on the state of Wisconsin, and Marquette University was the first dental school to come forward with what is called a privilege license. Up until now, licensure in each state was either by completing a clinical exam, and I do believe it's a variety of live patient and mannequin based, or there are 7 states on the record now that will accept a PGY1 or post-residency year as an alternative pathway to licensure, New York being one of the first that put that on the books back in 2007. Marquette leading the way now with what is called a privilege license
Wisconsin.
For their state to encourage doctors to stay in the state. They've created a path of least resistance towards licensure. So they do not have to sit for a clinical exam or a mannequin exam. They do have to take their national boards part 1 and part 2, but they have a pathway forward. This currently is only recognized by the state of Wisconsin. But when I released the story, as things go, when the PGY1 came forward with New York back and, oh, thanks. Appreciate that, Tanya. When this originally came forward, like in New York, and they provided the opportunity for a PGY1 as an alternative to licensure. Now there are 7 states, I believe, that also recognize that as a pathway. So it's important to see what Marquette is doing, because it could begin to set a pathway forward for other states to say, oh, that's a great idea. We would like to have more retention in our state. We don't want doctors to leave and go to other states where there's bigger population growth. So we're going to provide a pathway forward as an incentive to stay. This gets a little more complicated now because we're also debating another large controversy in dentistry, which is the compact, which is now a huge national mobilization of states. I think we're up to 11 now that have signed on to this agreement to offer portability of licensure amongst those states. So if you're licensed in the state of Wyoming. Once you obtain that licensure and you have a clean history, you can go take that licensure to any other state that's recognized in the compact. Now, currently, the compact requires that you have a licensure exam, a final clinical exam, or the alternative pathway might be accepted. Privilege license, I would assume, will become part of the topic because, ironically, Wisconsin is also part of the compact. So anyway, that's why all this gets very muddy. It brought up a tremendous number of comments on our reel because we're seeing this in other industries. A popular industry that you've seen a lot of discussion about, it's been pilots. And, are we lowering standards for pilots to become pilots? And then they, are they going to crash planes and all these other things? So I think the population in general is just very sensitive about losing some of the integrity of the professions across all boards to ensure that people who say they can do a job can actually do the job. And it starts from the admission process all the way through the educational process to licensure and then into clinical practice. So that seems to be where this is all stemming from and what many of the comments have been so far.
Can I chime in first? Because I have several opinions on this. One is I don't think it is ever safe for any entity that is accepting money from someone else to be the sole entity that determines how well someone is doing and whether or not they can go out and protect the public in a way that they ought to. In other words, there is a financial interest for a Marquette to keep a dental student moving along. And not just a Marquette. I was in dental school with a few people that probably should not have graduated. And in fact, one of the people in my class who was
is on this show.
What's that?
I just said it's on this show.
He's watching the show right now.
Oh no.
You.
It's a she, and probably not. She was actually allowed to finish, but was told she would never be given licensure in South Carolina and that she really needed to consider research. And that's all I will say, is that she really had no business doing clinical dentistry. Nothing against her. She was brilliant. She was one of the smartest people in my class, but did not have the hands to really be treating patients clinically. And they told her that, but they said, we will graduate you. And there were several others that ran into some other issues, that there was a financial incentive for the school to keep students in, because if they can't fill a spot in the class, well, heck, right now, that's another $100,000 lost that they will not be able to recoup. So they have, they're conflicted as to, do I get rid of this person and tell this larger organization we're out $100,000 because we're not allowing this student to come back? I don't think that we can self-govern from the dental school. With that said, I also don't think that a one-day clinical exam is really going to tell someone what kind of clinician any person is. There are different levels of anxiety, nerves. Number 2 in my class prepped the DO instead of the MO he was supposed to. Totally nerves, great clinician, great hands, brilliant guy. He just effed up, and we've all done that. And yet he was put in a position where this one little procedure was going to determine whether he could practice in the state forever. So do I think that that's the proper path? No, but I think we have to have something other than the people teaching the students determining, or someone other than the entity that's accepting the money for the education saying whether they should practice or not. To me, the most logical path is a required PGY1, and I always say that that's not, dental, but at least a year of a clinical residency.
All right, so I'll go in there and I'll say that I see both sides, because I think that a dentist needs to be able to, demonstrate some level of competency and clinical care. However, a guy in the class a year ahead of me, probably, he was my big brother in the fraternity, one of the most brilliant people I've ever known, and a great example of a great clinical dentist. Barely failed, and this is going back to 1998. Barely failed, based on a 100-point scale, the regional exams, not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. And I'm telling you, if you asked any instructor at our dental school, they would tell you that his hand skills were the best. Everybody loved this guy. He may not have been number 1 in his class, but sometimes number 1's hand skills aren't the best. Sometimes number 99s are, but he was an incredible dentist, had a great job lined up, and it wrecked him as a human being. And he ended up having to go seek licensure elsewhere because he refused to take the regional exam again. He didn't know. I mean, he felt it was so subjective in nature. And so, and I had shadowed this guy throughout dental school. I looked up to him. I admired him. I knew it wasn't him. And so I see that side of it. But Tanya just said that there's a exam that's used that's more of an exam to assess clinical judgment. I like that idea too. I do think there needs to be a level of competency, a level of capability in order to be a dentist. I don't know that I completely disagree with the licensure, but I do completely disagree with somebody saying you can graduate, but you're never allowed to practice in X state. I do disagree with that.
And put that in today's terms, Jeff, that's when you were in school. And I'll be honest, like the cost of dental school for us pales in comparison to what these folks are paying today. So can you imagine going year 1, year 2, you've kind of gotten through, it's not been easy and you're struggling. And in some schools, you don't really pick up a true handpiece on a patient until about that time period. And you realize you're not good at this. Like it's not your gift. And you're 250 grand in debt at this particular point, maybe more, to come to the realization that this may not be your professional path forward. And the school is somewhat obligated to continue to sort of scoot you along from a liability perspective because they don't want to get sued because you don't.
That's the other piece of it. I didn't even mention.
But then they also recognize that they've asked you, in my opinion, erroneously, to pay 250 grand to get to this point, only to determine that you may or may not actually even enjoy this profession. I had a very dear friend in school, brilliant human being who went on to med school, got to year 2 and realized dentistry was not her thing. Like she did not fundamentally enjoy the skill. I don't even think that it was that she couldn't do it. She didn't enjoy it. She didn't like it. It's like taking a pottery class and then learning you actually don't like to make pottery. Except today, that would have cost her $250,000 to make that decision to say, you know what, in hindsight, this probably wasn't the best choice for me. And many folks are admitted into dentistry, into the schools with no experience, no real experience, because how can you really have that experience? Kind of conceptualizing that they think this will be a profession that they'll enjoy and that they might be good at, only to get through some portion of it and realize they don't like it, but now they're sort of stuck. And the schools aren't going to fire them because they don't want to get sued. And I will also note, we haven't even discussed this really yet, but I see it posted a fair amount on many platforms. It would appear, and I am only speaking from an observatory perspective because I'm not in dental school, that many of the requirements have also decreased. So where Jeff may have done X number of crowns, bridges, root canals, dentures, extractions, blah, blah, blah. Maybe Chad and I did a similar proportion of that. Maybe we didn't. It's hard to say. Now, I think it's precipitously dropped off since COVID. And if you're in a school that has multiple specialties in it, like UNC, I think that number goes down, but not at UNC. I don't know. But I think you could surmise that it could go down even further because we're all fighting for the same patient population to do those extended procedures. So at the end of the day, now you worry about, can you actually even obtain the clinical competency that you should be justly due in the dental school pathway?
Yeah. So this would be my argument. Think about, and I'm just trying to think about parallels. And so if we think about other people who actually perform procedures on patients with their hands. So obviously the first thing that comes to my mind, let's just say a general surgeon. Okay.
Yeah.
It is not medical school where they've been paying into that judges their ability to carry out these tasks. They do residencies where they are paid to be a resident and to work under all of these other doctors who will then get to mold this person and say, yes, this person is competent. They will write letters to the licensing agencies and say, yes, this is a competent surgeon. He has worked under me. I have watched him open people. I've watched him close people. And I've done this on a daily basis for the last 5 years or 4 years or whatever it is. And there's no conflict of interest because, you know, they don't have any skin in the game. They're not getting paid by this guy to say that. They have actually, or the hospital has been paying this person and compensating them. And their only job is to judge, is this person going to be good in this position? And I will either back them in front of the board and licensing agency, or I will not. And that's why I kind of feel like these residency-based licensure would actually make the most sense, because you're judging people in an uncompromised manner, number one, but number two, it's the same people who are watching you day in and day out that can go to bat for you. And I just don't see a one-day exam. I've never loved the whole board exam thing. I just don't see that as really being a good indicator. I don't think a one-night sleep study is a good indicator of sleep. I don't think a one-day test for a dentist or a 2-day test for a dentist to show clinical skills is a good test either.
I thought you were going to say a one-night stand is not a good indication for a wife.
I really did too. I thought he was
That's
headed
what
in,
It's
yeah.
not, actually. It's
You
not.
guys have no faith in me at all.
No. It was just the way it was phrased. I was like, he's going to do it. He's going to do it.
No.
But also, in fairness, it's not. If we can just go on record to say a one-night stand is, in fact, not a great way to find a wife or a husband.
No, I think that's actually great.
I think at least
No,
2
I wish
nights.
I would have said it.
You need at least 2 nights. On that same note, though, I agree with you, Jeff. And you know, I definitely knew colleagues that were like, they would prep the tooth. The patient would go back to get checked for the preparation. And then the patients were like, almost like forming a union back in the area where they were getting checked, and then coming back and saying it's $100 more to fill, like extorting.
In Florida, they pay for the patients.
No, we paid for sure.
That's what I mean.
You go recruit, you offer them $100, $200, whatever, to show up that day. But they were then going into the area to be checked, kind of forming like a co-response. And then coming back out and saying, all right, well, it's $100 extra to fill it.
We're representing the board patient union.
Right. Exactly. Like, and if you want to talk about ethics, like that whole process is not 100% ethical. It's a
Okay.
little dicey for sure.
Let's talk about this too. Who had to pay their board patients?
I think a lot of people paid expenses
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah,
For sure.
Like,
yeah.
you know,
Well, how do you
here's
handle
your
this?
gas, here's your, you know, here's for your day, here's a meal.
Yeah.
But I know, so a couple of my friends, I did a residency in New Jersey, and a couple of my friends wanted to move to Florida, and the way that the boards work down there was absolutely crazy. Like, they literally were soliciting patients in a mall, right? I mean,
Yeah, I would like to say that wasn't happening in North Carolina, but it definitely was.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we got people that are paying their patients. I was very fortunate. I offered, and I had some wonderful like moms that were like, no, absolutely not. However, we had people that were paying their patients, and then they're sitting in the
Are we
waiting
back on the
room.
one night stands?
Yeah, they're sitting in the waiting area, and they find out what, you know, Joe's getting
Yep.
paid, and then Tom refuses to come back because he wants what Joe's getting paid.
Yep.
And at that point in time, they got you by the yin yang. You know,
You're
you just
going to
do whatever.
pay.
And then one of my good buddies, he goes to get his patient the second day to seat the gold inlay that he did the day before. Homeboy's in jail. Homeboy went on a rager that night
You
with
can't make that up.
friggin' temporary in his mouth while we're casting gold inlays, and some bitch got thrown in jail.
That's actually really
and
phenomenal.
That's the shit that happens. You know,
That's right.
We're relying on the general public, paid or not, to come in. And, you know, I hate to say it, it's utter bullshit. I will say it, utter bullshit that we have to pay people to come in to take an examination that our livelihood depends upon.
Yeah.
I
But you also have to say, I don't think it's prudent to just say that the people who are getting paid a lot of money to educate these students are the ones responsible to say whether or not they are up to snuff to go out and treat the public. I mean, the board of examiners, or not the board, or the state boards, really their responsibility is to the public, is to the safety of the public.
100%.
We have to put out dentists that are going to keep the public safe. And I think we're the only profession that really does it the way that we do it. And to me, residency based makes the most sense. And I have no problem. I do think every dentist should have to spend at least 1 year in a general practice residency, because with declining requirements, there's just no way they can even know that you just don't have the clinical experience to be seeing the general public at that point.
You know, I'm going to tease the next topic a little bit.
Hold on. Can I say, I don't want to go. I don't want to leave
I
yet.
don't think
we're not leaving it. We're not leaving it at all.
I don't want to leave yet.
No, we're not leaving it. But what I'm going to say is that we're judged by a group of peers as to whether we're able to treat the masses. Yet, maybe next time we'll be able to talk about being judged by a group of peers on our diagnoses and or treatment, and as to whether or not we're capable of charging the public for services that we deem appropriate.
Love it.
It never ends.
That's the insurance topic. I love it.
Well, that and the board, frankly. As well.
I mean, and so sorry, I wasn't ending this by any means, Jennifer.
But I just started sweating a little bit. So I had these two comments.
It's called menopause.
Yeah. Perry. So
I'm in menopause.
I'm Perry old age.
the one thing I will say that I like about the board examination, the clinical licensure, whether we want to discuss the merits of each individual one or whatever, but I like the concept of an unbiased reviewer. Mm-hmm. In theory, these are blinded reviews of your work, not at risk of being sued because of who you are, who you came from, who your dad is, like whatever it happens to be, that it's supposed to be like a double-blinded study to look at you objectively to determine if you have the clinical competency. So I do like that concept. And yeah. And I would also say that I think we're sort of definitely encroaching an era in which there's a lot of compression from DSOs and other large entities that benefit greatly from the path of least resistance to get the most number of doctors into the marketplace at any given time, to be able to have a pool of individuals that they can have for employment opportunities, and what their responsibility and role that they're playing and how licensure developments are happening over time, I think is interesting and definitely should not be ignored as well.
Yeah.
I also think,
Go ahead,
though,
Dan.
that we're dismissing some valuable aspects of clinical dentistry. We're dismissing diagnosis. We're dismissing treatment planning. And everything that we do, if we pass, is a situational success, because we're dismissing follow-up, continuity of care, post-op complications. There's a number of things that we've dismissed.
Absolutely.
We are taking a very static procedure at a very static point in time and determining if it's a success and if it's successful enough for us to carry on. And I also think we're dismissing proper consent, which is another future topic. Discuss.
But Chad, now Tanya Sue mentioned the DLOSCE, which actually takes into account that judgment side. I love making that a part of licensure. I think that is ideal, but I still think we need that clinical side. We are still putting our hands on people and working on people. And that's why I like a lot of the residency based determinants for that. And it doesn't have to be a clinical exam, but certainly the people that you do residency with, backing you up, writing letters. There was something else that you said, Jennifer. I can't remember it right.
Well, I'll jump in and give you another item to stew on then, and then maybe it'll come to you, because mine came actually after I started listening to you guys. Here's another interesting pro comment for why we should have these stressful moments. Each one of you, when we logged on today, reported how hard your day had been, right? And if you were to reflect back on your career in dentistry, while it's been good and enjoyable, there have been many days in which you were forced to make really hard decisions, have really hard conversations, do really hard clinical dentistry. And that's just the microcosm of your practice. That's not even considering your spouses, your children, your loved ones, whatever shenanigans may be going on in that world. My business partner and I were talking about this the other day when we were talking about this whole discussion on licensure. There is something to be said about putting individuals into a compression zone, like a licensure exam, to see how they perform. Now, whether or not that should determine their whole livelihood, that's up for debate. But it is a very real representation of an average day in the dental office. It's stressful. You're getting pulled in 10 different directions. You're forced to make decisions under duress. You have to MacGyver a few things together with a Bic pen and a safety and a paper clip to see if you can put a tooth back together. Like, you do want a dentist to be able to come out of a stressful situation with some clarity of vision, of decision making, to still be able to pick up a handpiece and make choices. And all I would say is that there is something to be said, and you kind of see this in medicine a lot, when you throw them into the fire and you force them to start making decisions in a very uncomfortable way, you're forcing them to determine whether or not they're going to be able to rise up to the top and be able to make really hard choices when the time comes. And as business owners and medical professionals, we're often forced into those types of scenarios.
Oh, I know what it was that you said, Jennifer. So you talked about it being very objective in the clinical exam and the board exam. And I will tell you, having gone to school in South Carolina and having sat for the South Carolina Dental Board exam, everybody did know everybody. And yes, it was anonymous. It was not anonymous. And I would challenge that. I think that that's the case in a lot of places. And again, there are vested interests, and I think I don't think that is the right platform. I think we've been doing it incorrectly. And so I'm not the guy that's saying that this privilege license thing is bad because it needs to go back to the way that I did it. I don't think the way I did it was correct. I do think that the DLO SCE exam is great for determining clinical judgment, and then I think everyone should do some form of a residency so that they can work with a group that is not being paid or has no financial interest in the outcome of said candidate.
What do you think, Chad? Exactly.
I agree. I think it's time to close the show.
Well, I think we need to do that
because we've gone.
But I think we can all agree that no one agrees on the path forward. Like,
I'd agree with that, but I think I would say ours was more blind than in South
I just
Carolina.
snorted.
Yeah, did you?
I did.
I think it proves the point of how controversial this is. It goes from how we admit students into dental schools. We can talk about the number of dental schools that are currently on the market today, how we move them through their clinical education, how we determine competency along the way to ensure that it's unbiased and at the best interest of both the dentist, the dental student, and the public health simultaneously, and then how we move them forward to become professionals. And I think we've all highlighted at least numerous opportunities that we could improve this. The problem is there's a fair amount of entrenchment, I think, in many of the current ways that we do our business. And so I don't personally see this changing very fast.
I just don't like the idea of how do we get them into the marketplace faster. I
don't know that that's true or not, but I certainly could see the benefit to them if you're not having to wait.
There is a
for
benefit.
them to...
There is a group that is actually investing in dental school programs to do just that very thing. And a lot of people would be mad at me for saying that, but I don't think getting people out faster is the right answer.
No, and not at their current requirements. In fact, you could argue a 5th or 6th year actually is becoming more and more necessary with the fact that they barely touch technology. They really don't do much in occlusion.
Well, again, look to our medical counterparts. How many of them are allowed to perform surgery or do anything with their hands?
At year 5.
Exactly.
Zero. Chad, would you like to close us out? Do you have like some prophetic saying to get us moving on our way?
I would just say that I don't know that there is an answer, and I don't know that we're the 3 people that would come up with an answer. But I think it's definitely a topic worth debating. I think that we're all on the same page. We have a bunch of different opinions, but they're all in line with one another. I mean, and so I think it's definitely a topic that we need to debate. I think we're all in favor of some sort of advanced training and some sort of change to the examination for licensure. But there's no easy answer, and maybe they would hire us to consult for for a valid conclusion, if that would be safe to say. One of the things that I wanted to say tonight as we close out the show is there's somebody that's very near and dear to me that we lost this past week, and Dr. John Burgess. For those of you that don't know Dr. Burgess, I guarantee you he's influenced something that you've done in your practice. He was an incredible biomaterials researcher. You may not know this about me as viewers or patrons of the show, but I'm a huge nerd when it comes to biomaterials and cementation, adhesion, bonding, and so on and so forth. And the majority of what I follow comes from Dr. John Burgess and his little protege, Dr. Nate Lawson, through their lab in Birmingham, Alabama. Dr. Burgess was certainly a great influence to modern dentistry. I would venture to say one of the godfathers of modern dentistry. And unfortunately, we lost him this past week. But his legacy will live on for many years, decades to follow, because he definitely was a pioneer in the way that we do modern dentistry. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Burgess for everything that you did to dentistry. May you rest in peace and may your legacy live on. And with that being said, let's close out tonight's show. And next week, who's our guest next week? Dr. Tom Viola, right? So
Always a treat.
Always a treat. And I'm sad that I won't be
there. And
there.
it's not just because he's from Jersey.
Oh, he brings so much knowledge. Like I find myself over here just taking notes, like
a lot of there. I needed him like 3 times today. I'll tell you that. So anyhow, we welcome Dr. Tom Viola, and then the next week we have Dr. Jerry Hugh. And then my proposition to everybody is we only got through one topic tonight. July 10th, right now we have an open date. If we don't fill it, let's go on to the insurance.
Let's do it. I love it.
Game on.
Because it's very obvious we can do one topic
dumb idea.
Entire night.
Yeah.
I love that everyone is a part of our experiment.
Yeah, and I think it was well received. So I think that's always really good. They don't hate it.
Received. Yeah. So anyhow, everybody have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next week.
Good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.